G'day, May 40 here. So you may have noticed that the same people tend to pioneer all the oncoming stages of technology use. So Joe Rogan, he was big on cam streams and Ustreams back in 2007, 2008. I started blogging July 3rd, 1997. I'm still blogging. And then within a year, I started using photos, adding photos to my blog, video to my blog. I was doing the equivalent of podcasts, but they were live going across the internet in 2002, 2003. So a new favorite writer of mine, J. Caspian King, in the New Yorker, is talking about how tech has come to dominate politics. So media is no longer just a tool for politicians to get out their message, right? Politicians now have to shape themselves into optimized vessels for social media. So if you have an independent income, right, if you're not depending on your live stream or your blogging or your online production for your living, then you get to determine how much you shape yourself to be an optimized vessel for new eras of social media. But politicians are most effective when they shape themselves to reflect the moment, right? There are going to be some moments that are going to play much more effectively to left-wing concerns, right? We need more of the mother type. We need more nurturing. We need more social welfare spending, right? Those kind of moments. Elections fought over welfare, fought over healthcare. Moments that are going to play much better for the left, and then elections that are fought over law enforcement, over national defense, right? Those type of elections, when people feel unsafe, they're going to play much more to the strong points of the right. And so we don't know what tomorrow brings. And what's going to determine the success of a particular government, as Harold Macmillan said back in the 1950s, events, my dear boy, events. So in 2016, Trump became the Twitter president, but information technology has changed in the past 9 years. And so now Donald Trump has turned himself into the ideal president for the short form video format. And so Trump has come to dominate TikTok. So why has Trump completely changed his tune with regard to TikTok? Because he's doing really well on TikTok. So Trump does long rallies. You could call them long-winded rallies, and the press may deride them. But with good editing, right, you can find incredible clips. And so viral clip makers, right, they know you just keep the camera rolling, something interesting is bound to happen. Donald Trump's the biggest star that social media has ever seen, and now he's equally a big star in the TikTok age, right? He's now on stage, in the director's chair, and at the ticket booth at the same time. So Trump has understood that the attention economy has shifted towards platforms like TikTok and YouTube with YouTube Shorts. I sometimes cut my long-form programs into YouTube Shorts because my long shows will get 300, 500,000 views, all right, spread over many different platforms. But the shorts will sometimes get 100,000 views. So if I've got an idea that's particularly important to me, put it out there in the form of a short, and I'll get a lot more views on it. So what's going on with big tech? We saw the titans of big tech showing up at Trump's inauguration. Is big tech shifting right? Well, I would think that it would be normal, natural, and healthy for big tech to have something of a libertarian impulse and to generally want as little government regulation as possible. And that's currently regarded as a right-wing thing. So rather than having to employ fact checkers and extensive people who are going to monitor what goes across social media, it will obviously be more in big tech's favor to just have a more libertarian approach. So some cautious platforms won't go full Elon Musk. They'll hedge their bets. But we do see increasing expressions of free speech throughout social media. And I'm curious, when will the Washington Commanders of the National Football League turn back into the Washington Redskins? That would be a healthy development. So 4 years ago, Donald Trump was banned from all the major social media platforms, and now the owners of these social media platforms are showing up at his inauguration. So it was Elon Musk buying Twitter that began the journey into increased free speech online. And so we're entering the era of diminished fact-checking, and this is a good thing, right? Our online life may feel a little bit more scammy and conspiracy-brained, but the attempts to control disinformation, bigoted speech, or Trump himself should all be seen as failures that only further the suspicion that the liberal establishment was trying to censor and suppress beliefs of half the country, which was exactly what was going on from 2018 to 2021. The resistance has lost its voice. Many outlets, including the New York Times, have written stories now about the seeming lack of outrage and resolve among Democrats. I've noticed this myself since the election. Many traumatized liberals have shied away from the news. We see a muting of dissent and an inability to organize mass protests. So wokeness had its time in 2020, 2021. But since then, Republicans have had increasing success clamoring about the downsides of wokeness. Right? Wokeness was nothing more than the maximized version of the progressive affinity system. Right? Wokeness was perfectly tailored for social media, rubber stamped by the elite establishment and the prestige news media. So what happens to the angry Democrats when they're cut off from their social affinity networks? You can only rage alone for so long. So if a large portion of liberals believe that even the worst of Donald Trump will not harm them, so if they fall into a weary sort of acceptance, will the mainstream media follow suit? So the Obama years gave rise to a technocratic voice that was shaped by the rise of blogging. Blogging, in turn, had its own demands, the need to post constantly, no longer had the time to call 5 people to take the temperature around an issue. And then we moved to the age of podcasts and live streams and just increasingly open levels of conversation about many topics that the elite establishment believes that should not be discussed out loud. There is a huge difference between the views of average Americans, which are very pro-free speech, and the views of elites, which believe that social media needs to be severely restricted. The elites believe far more in censorship than do regular people. Now, video, it comes with its own requirements, such as drama, beefs, insults, exciting narratives. So blogging had its time. Now we're in the age of vlogging. And J. Caspian King has a great insight here. I found in my career that the same people tend to be the first movers on every new platform. Some people just have that talent. So now we have a shift from data back towards narrative and drama. As we enter the Trump restoration, any auguries about the next 4 years need to be adequate to this mytho-poetic landscape. Right? Essentially, we now are entering the age of narrative and drama, something that is dramatically fitting in the fate that is envisioned for both the president and the United States. So can the liberal mainstream media return to cinematic, mythopoetic, dramatic narratives and away from the technocratic approach of the Obama years? And this New Yorker writer, New Yorker is very much a publication on the left, is quite skeptical. I don't know of any story that can survive the hostilities of the people who own the airways. So if in 2017, a Trump associate such as Elon Musk had given a Sieg Heil-like salute that Trump gave this week on Inauguration Day, every news outlet would have multiple stories offering frame-by-frame analysis. Historians would be called in to provide context. Every social media app would be trembling with outrage. Liberal media's response to Musk has followed that template, but at a fraction of the expected scale. So the politics of calling everyone who's not on the left, a fascist, has not worked, and maybe the Democrats will move on to some news story. And this author sees more capitulation than strategy in the tempered response to Donald Trump's second term. Most liberals I know, he says, have chosen to log off and wait until the next election cycle. Who can blame them for not registering their outrage on the platforms of the men who lined up behind the Trump family at the inauguration? The trolls won the medium, and the country went with it. So in the contest between the news article and the comment section, the comment section has won the 2016 election and the 2024 election. So Adam Carolla is a pretty authentic voice of the people.
Know you, and just can't wait to see you tee off on just the idiocy that happens in California and around the world. Here's a cut. I love this. This is you talking about, and the theory is that with the fires in L.A., people are going to wake up. As you described them, all these liberals that are up there on the cliffs enjoying the ocean and everything are going to wake up, and they could possibly be transformed. Here's a little bit what you said.
These are all sitting around crying about Karen Bass, water pressure, how come the forest wasn't cleared of all the brush. You guys all voted for Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles. You all voted for Gavin Newsom. And now you get what you get. All these people are now going to have to pull a permit to rebuild. And they're going to get the 28-year-old from the Coastal Commission telling them to go off. And then they're going to vote for Trump or whoever's Trumpian next. You see, they're going to get turned between the part where they go in initially and try to pull a permit to the time the first load of 2x4s is dropped off or their house formerly stood. It's going to be 3 years.
Still stand by all that?
Yeah.
Go in initially and try to pull a permit
to build
to the time the
Los
first
Angeles,
load of 2x4s.
my whole adult life. I mean, I used to work as a contractor, so I was sort of on to the city and the regulations and the permits and that process for a long time. And I've always talked about it, and no one cared. And now, in the last...
So I started watching a lot of Adam Carolla over the past week, and one thing that's taken me by surprise is how many celebrities he knows. Like, he talks about texting Kevin Costner to come to a fight, his friendship with Peter Berg. Yeah, one of the best things about success is the high quality of people you get to hang out with. One of the worst things about failure is your reduced social options.
Last 10 minutes, other people seem to talk about it, and people seem to care.
Do you think when these guys try to pull this permit, do you think they'll slowly begin to realize these are the people that we supported, these are the rules, the regulations, these are the permits in order to save the environment, everything else, and then they'll go, well, we don't like it? Will they start to actually move towards the right or the center, or will they just simply make a few phone calls because they know enough rich people to be able to circumvent those rules and regulations that are put in place for all the rest of the common people?
They'll basically start down the road that Bill Maher started down a few years ago. He was always very left and progressive, and then he had to go pull some permits for his solar at his house. And once he started to try to pull permits for the solar, that's when he started to sound a little more like me.
Yeah.
But it was really the process of having to build something and seeing just how big and intrusive this city and the state is.
Mm.
I mean, I tried to get solar. I tried to do solar at a house 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago. I tried to do solar at a house in the Hollywood Hills. And I was like, I was remodeling. I was doing like a big remod on a house. And I was like, if I'm doing a big remod, I want to do solar. And I started to inquire about solar. And they said, well, only in Los Angeles do they require a master cutoff switch outside of the gate. So you have a house, it's got a gate, and the master cutoff switch needs to be outside the gate.
Uh-huh.
And they said nowhere else. Everyone else, you just put it on the panel. But only in LA, it's got to be the outside. If you have a gate, it's got to be outside the gate. And they said, I don't know why, but it does. And I said, well, how do you get the master cutoff switch to the gate? And they said, well, you have to trench about 300 feet and run conduit and then put it on the outside of the gate. And I said, that's way too much work and too expensive, too big a hassle. And they're like, I agree. And I never got solar. But they want you to get solar.
Right.
That's the funny part. They keep begging you to get solar, but then they love solar, but they love regulations more. And so they put things in place that are sort of nuts and, again, don't exist in other municipalities. And people start either they don't get solar or they move or they get like Bill Maher, which is they start getting angry.
How much of that, Adam Carolla, do you think is the people that are in these positions, the bureaucracy of the city or the county, because they're envious, jealous, they don't like the rich guys, so they're going to get in there and they're going to just make life difficult for them?
Obviously, they're. If you listen to them talk, it's always this rich guys. They never. For considering it's rich guys who pay all the taxes to keep the lights on, there's not a lot of reverence for those guys. It's a Democratic Party thing. They turn these guys into the enemy every time Biden talks, every time Kamala Harris talks, anytime Gavin Newsom, any of these people that are rich people that hang out with rich people that need rich people to fund their thing. Whenever they start talking about oligarchs and rich guys, they demonize taxpayers, essentially. And they're not paying their fair share. It's like that, but it's not. The higher income earners pay 13% state tax in California. I don't know, why is that not your fair share? I mean, Bill Maher, makes $20 million a year. He probably pays $3 million in state taxes a year. Is that not good enough? School teacher who paid $180 last year in state taxes.
Yeah.
Like, why is Bill Maher the problem? I don't, or whoever, Adam Carolla. Like, why are the big earners and the taxpayers? Why are they the issue? It's class warfare. Yeah. It's a debate. I mean, it's all.
Okay, I read an essay by an attractive young woman, Mana Afsari, and she writes about the last boys of history. Okay. For thepointmag.com. Last boys at the beginning of history. And she talks about all the young men who are finding considerable meaning, purpose, and connection in life through a unironic embrace of Donald Trump. And she's not MAGA, but she's fair. So she talks about a few months before the 2024 election, Gen Z young men who are leaning toward Trump were described in the New York Times as apolitical and adrift. Is it implied that they'd been manipulated into Trumpism by bro-whispering podcasts? Maybe this was true for some. It was not true of the young, mostly male and intellectually curious Trump voters who I encountered this past summer during a reporting assignment to cover two overlapping conferences in July. First, the fourth installment of the National Conservatism Conference, NatCon, and then Liberalism for the 21st Century Conference, organized by the Institute for the Study of Modern Authoritarianism. So the first conference, people there are right-wing. Second conference, people are left-wing. The young men that I met at NatCon and who I kept up with throughout the summer and fall were far from apolitical. They showed no signs of being easily manipulable. When they described how they arrived at their political outlook, none of them cited podcasts. I attended these conferences not as a professional journalist, but as a young person interested in ideas. I had no bias against liberals or toward post-liberals and national conservatives. I was raised just outside of Washington, D.C. by immigrants. I'd come of age at the end of the Obama liberal renaissance. I spent my college years in Trump's first terms on a progressive campus in California, USC. Since graduating in 2020, worked at large government agencies and mainstream think tanks. But I've been searching for thinking and meaning beyond the technocratic liberal consensus. And so I became part of a politically mixed up social scene in D.C. and discovered that despite the 20th century liberal occupying the White House, intellectual vitalism in my generation was increasingly to be found in post-liberal or conservative spaces, in other words, on the right. I expected to find a political sideshow at NatCon. Instead, I found a movement, perhaps the only one I'd encountered during my time in D.C. She talks about one man and his exact concerns: how to live a good life, how to find love, how to cultivate meaning, how to make great choices in life. And when the author was at university herself in her sophomore year in early 2017, I asked the secular humanist chaplain at the University of Southern California, where I studied, how I could set myself up for a good life in college and beyond. How could I be happy? How could I find a vocation or a calling? How could I be a good person? Chaplain told me to look around and identify the people who had lives I wanted to live. Asked myself what their values were. I quickly realized that these moral exemplars were not in the secular student group I joined, which had become increasingly morally vacant, pseudo-rationalist and eccentric, drawn to effective altruism and convinced by Sam Harris that murder was merely a social construct, to say nothing of love. More and more of my female friends were embracing polyamory as a way to grandfather in situationships or infidelities, while being told in special seminars that monogamy was a colonial construct and should be discarded. As a child of divorce, as a young woman, my primary concern was having models for healthy relationships, not resisting colonialism in my dating life. I had no interest in subverting things like monogamy, moral norms, courtship, the nuclear family, faith, a classical education, things that I'd never had or never known in the first place. I wanted a serious boyfriend. Other liberal students and professors, if they had some personal success, whether wealth, wisdom, marriage, they dare not talk about it, since it would put them at the risk of being seen as trying to be better than others or morally prescriptive. Plus, after 2016, there was a fascist on the loose. Metaphysics, values, these are impossible in Trump's America. It was best not to betray one's privilege by trying to discuss them. The authority figures on campus, the teachers, the chaplain, did not want to or could not give guidance or even basic classroom instruction during Trump 1.0, so I turned away from the tyranny of the present political moment to the timeless classics. I chose to study ancient Greek. In my third semester, the professor frequently interrupted our close readings of the Iliad's 8th century Greek to try to relate the events of Troy to Trump's latest political activities. I came away having read almost none of the Iliad. All I remember is forming half of a tiny audience for one male professor's personal op-ed and therapy session. I was begging to be given values, community, a purpose, a vocation, and found none. People need this. People need a hero system, which they will get from their community. Right? Find your people, find your tribe, find your community, you'll find your hero system. Find your tribe, find your people, you'll find your purpose. Find your tribe, find your people, you'll find your vocation and your avocation. Instead, my teachers repeated what they'd heard on the news. In due time, by pursuing what was left of a liberal arts education, I met professors who were eager to teach me. My entire life, I'd been told that conservatives and religious people and men were monsters, idiots, abusers, or dangerous bigots. The first conservatives I met, it turned out, were among the few faculty at my university who took their disciplines seriously on their own terms. Whether philosophy, literature, or ancient languages, the few conservative, apolitical, or moderate professors I worked with on campus never asked me where I stood, but how I thought. They saw a young woman choosing to study the liberal arts on scholarships and gave me an education. The most serious poet and poetry teacher I met on campus was the former chair of the National Endowment for the Arts under a Republican president. Other faculty criticized and dismissed him to me on this account. He was the son of Mexican and Italian immigrants, raised in working-class Los Angeles. He didn't worry whether the canon he loved and discovered by luck, like me, was outdated or exclusive. We, both children of immigrants, were part of it. His happy half-century marriage was the first I'd ever seen up close. I wanted to be like him. He told me how scores of young men who took his general education course would come to his office hours looking for advice, how many of them didn't have fathers, how they felt marginalized and mocked by campus culture. Jordan Peterson realized this before anyone. He quipped. And then in her junior year, she went to study at Cambridge University on a research exchange where she met James Orr, a professor of philosophy of religion, and he introduced her to the National Conservatism Conference. And she reflects from talking to these earnest young men at the NACON conference. It's our common objects of love that stitch us together as a moral community. Yeah, find people you love, find connection, find community, find friends, create your own family. And from that, you'll get all the morality and meaning in life that you need. Right? It's that shared horizon of affection that will keep you going. Will give you reason to get up in the morning. It'll keep you writing those checks to the government without too much resentment for the neighbors benefiting from entitlements, welfare, and largesse. This is what made America great, Britain great, Israel great, India great. And it's what can make us all great again, a sense of commonality, a purpose, high social trust, high social cohesion, a sense that we're all in it together and share a common project. Every young man I recognized at the conference, and hundreds that I do not recognize, are enraptured. Whether it's the Yale summer intern, the aspiring law student, the millennial conservative think tanker. The mention of entitlements and welfare would have stood out to young conservatives 20 years ago, but not to the young men born during the Clinton and Bush administration. They raved to me about the references to history, love, and greatness. And her professor of religious philosophy says, what struck me in the Senate today, he tells the young American audience, was that your American Revolution was not a revolution. It was a restoration of the spirit of a people, its customs, its byways, its songs, its heritage, its history, its faith, its institutions. Restoration, not revolution. It's restoration. That is our most urgent task. It is the vocation to which every single one of you is summoned. Somehow the National Conservatism Conference, home to a movement emphasizing national loyalty, marriage, civic responsibility, religion, tapped into energies that felt fresher, freer, and wilder than the once natural home of soulful young men and women, the left or liberalism. The NatCons addressed questions of the heart. They recognized that the young need ideals and aspirations, and most of all, a vocation. Then the next day, she goes a mile down Massachusetts Avenue to attend a different conference, Liberalism for the 21st Century. Right? And it is put on by the left. It promises to counter illiberal ideologies and authoritarians. It's organized by an institution whose magazine is called The Unpopulist. I walk in and I see a sea of white hair, white heads shaking in disapproval on every other panel like parodies of 19th century conservatives, stayed unaware, too furious at the incomprehensible incomprehension of the young towards their legitimate authority to understand their own decline. Most attendees have professional reasons to be there, right? So you often go to synagogue and you find sometimes a lot of professional Jews, right? People are essentially paid to keep the Sabbath and keep the traditions, right? These attendees at this liberal conference have professional reasons to be there. Matthew Iglesias, Yesha Monk, Jonathan Rauch. During one of the first panels, the main auditorium is empty and quiet enough that I'm afraid, standing by the refreshments, to pour myself another glass of iced tea should I draw too much attention. As I carefully put my glass down, Columbia University professor Damon Linker gives me a warm smile, perhaps encouraged to see someone young and unknown there. So the speakers talk about losing ground among a disenchanted global electorate. Panel after panel discusses the sociological, electoral, and material causes, but never the intellectual and spiritual causes of post-liberal politics. I overhear David French tell a huddle of rapt listeners that social science could entirely explain post-liberalism. The science says the more isolated people are, the more likely they are to be attracted to illiberal ideas. His prescription for combating populism is more thick friendships. The mood at the Liberalism Conference and the position of those athwart post-liberal progress is well summed up by a young man. As we applaud liberalism's most robust defense, he jokes loudly to his friend, "Yeah, woohoo! What are we going to do?" The NatCons may not know exactly who they are. Are they economic leftists who hate leftism, right-wing progressives who hate progress, moral traditionalists who praise the male libido? But they know what they're doing. They have a vocation. Does anyone else? Thoughtful essay from a young lady. People need to belong. we're a highly individualist culture, we could probably deal with a little bit more collectivism, a little bit more of a sense that we're all in it together. And you can fireproof your house, for example. But if your neighbors don't fireproof their house, then your house is more likely to go up in flames. This is from the Los Angeles Fire Department video, Designed for Disaster, the story of the Bel Air Conflagration 1962.
But even in such attempts to save individual homes, firemen are further thwarted by the loss of water. How can a modern water system properly designed to meet emergency fire conditions fail to function? Let's look at this simplified diagram of houses on a hill being supplied by a water tank above. When thousands of outlets are opened below the hill, water pressure is lost in the overtaxed main, regardless of the amount of water above the houses. Where the water supply comes from a distant location and supply pipes dead end on the hill, unnecessary use of too many outlets below the fire area simply drains the water out of the upper system. We have considered water, wind, and weather. Now there's the very real problem of how a house is constructed and where. Suppose we live in a house above the congestion of the neighborhood below, or in a stilt house built over the brush, or in a typical home with a combustible roof, wide low eaves to catch sparks and fire, and a big picture window to let the fire inside. Under any such conditions, there's not much of a chance. In 1959, experts from the National Fire Protection Association surveyed portions of Los Angeles. They found a mountain range within the city, combustible roofed houses closely spaced in brush-covered canyons and ridges, serviced by narrow roads. They called it a design for disaster. They predicted the Bel Air fire, plus others which are sure to come, unless citizens and city officials work together on a definite plan of fire defense. The prediction was nothing new to firemen. They have their own ideas about people who don't like water pumping stations or fire stations in their neighborhood because they feel that they're unsightly. Or homeowners who refuse to cut brush away from homes because it mars the natural beauty of the hills. And those groups who maintain to the last glowing ember that combustible roofs are not hazardous in fire areas, despite the fact that over 600 cities have outlawed them. Firefighters are thankful that such is not the thinking of the majority of citizens. But it does not take a majority to start a fire or to feed a conflagration that burns out the careful along with the careless. You are only as safe as your neighbor. When you live in a hazardous area, you're gambling that fire won't start from hot ashes, a cigarette, children with matches, a faulty chimney, auto accidents, a firebug, fallen wires, or lightning. These are the odds.
Okay, Ross Douthat emailed out today in his newsletter how the liberal cathedral cracked up. Imagine showing the scenes inside the Capitol at Monday's inauguration to a visitor from the distant, misty past of 2021. Imagine them watching as the leaders of the same American tech industry that just 4 years ago united to deplatform Donald Trump. Are they now crowded close around him, competing for his favor? Then think about how one might explain the larger change behind these scenes, the rapid movement from the era of woke capital, from a seeming alignment of all major American institutions on the side of liberalism and progressive ideology to instead a Trumpian restoration. Like, what the heck has happened here in just 4 years? Now we see the right's cultural gains as much larger than Donald Trump's electoral majority. So I'm curious what this left-wing historian has to say.
I think the time has come to release all of these documents. We have so many conspiracy theories going out there, and over a period of time, batches have been released.
All right, this is historian Douglas Brinkley, the son of ABC News anchor David Brinkley.
But we might as well just get this done with and see what happened. Bobby Kennedy Jr., I've spoken to him over the years. He's been on a hobby horse about believing the CIA killed his father. I'm not of that school, but he's taken the time to actually go meet Sirhan, the charged and imprisoned assassin, and Bobby Jr. wanting him released. Coretta Scott King and the King family, particularly Dexter, went to meet James Earl Ray, who killed King, and they believed Ray was innocent. So, there's been this confusion in the country on all three assassinations, and this should be the last big step. But we will never know if things were destroyed somewhere along the line. Let's see if any redactions are still hanging in there. But the argument now, after 50 years, that it's, we have to keep holding on to this stuff. I think transparency is good now, just like Frank Church, a Democrat of Idaho, did after Watergate. There are these moments where you got to let this stuff out, and Trump committed to it, and he lived through with it with that executive order.
I think he's. It says something about his larger feeling about the CIA and about things that are kept from the public. And certainly after this much time, it seems like it should be out. But as you point out, there may be things that were destroyed, and we'll see what the redactions look like. But in any event, it seems high time. It's interesting that Senator Blackburn, put out there today in this same.
Okay, back to Ross Douthat in his weekly newsletter, talking about even as the lords of Silicon Valley came to kiss the presidential ring, my colleague was interviewing Curtis Yarvin, an intellectual of the outside right, and it is his analysis of what Curtis Yarvin called the cathedral, the interlocking elite opinion-shaping institutions of our society, which tend to move in concert, leftward, always leftward, despite lacking any form of centralized control. So, more ideologically uniform across different institutions, universities, foundations, media, tech companies, corporate HR departments through the 2010s, more ambitious and radical in the ideas that it embraced, more lockstep in the way those ideas were propagated, and more inquisitorial. Have you committed a disinformation, my child? More in the control is seen prepared to exercise through the social media companies, especially over American discourse and debate. And Ross Douthat says there's no such thing as a purely liberal society, right? You're always going to need more than just liberalism. Man does not live by procedures alone. So liberalism plus democracy plus nationalism, liberalism plus religion, right? Liberalism and nationalism tend to work fairly well together. But how is the cathedral enforcing its power? Is it using a soft touch or a harsh touch? And we saw during COVID an increasingly harsh touch, bad touch, unsafe touch. So the cathedral had enormous power as long as it was in a soft phase. But once it entered the hard phase during COVID, then you got the bases for a revolution against the cathedral. Right, so now the vibes have shifted against liberals and progressives, but we haven't yet fundamentally undermined their cultural advantage. There's no existing version of the right that seems to be ready for its own form of rule. Populism is a blunt force weapon that tends to win elections, doesn't tend to be effective at governing. The AI models that may direct the future all lean distinctly left. But as long as the cathedral exercised a light touch and a gentle hegemony, as long as its power is exercised subtly and indirectly, right, these are all the hallmarks of a consensus built to last. But then during COVID, right, this consensus became a lot harsher it became explicit, right? It wasn't necessarily there staring you in the face. Many people wouldn't even be aware of it. And then during COVID, right, your average American citizen couldn't help but confront it. There's a Netflix documentary series on the Jerry Springer show that I want to discuss. Jerry Springer.
This is very unremarkable.
We have a nice surprise for you today, okay?
So Dennis Prager knew Jerry Springer, and he knew that Jerry Springer intended to do a high-minded talk show. But Jerry Springer ran into some trouble.
You are going to meet your daughter, Sandy, who you have not seen in 35 years.
He had a completely unremarkable
There was nothing
show.
about Jerry or the show that stuck out among the literally dozens of talk shows that were flooding the market at that time. It was just one more show.
Next time, take care of yourself and each other.
So my show rated the most highly, the more Jerry Springer-ish it became. All right. When we just had like crashes, like people were just crashing against each other on the show, then it was incredibly compelling. But I couldn't keep doing that because I realized it was really bad for people.
Ratings for talk shows always mattered. And if anybody said that anything else mattered more, they're lying to you. Every morning, you would get what was called an overnight sheet, and it would have all the talk shows listed and what they would do. You always wanted to...
Oh, so when you look at this sheet that they show you here, oh, come on. Oh, okay.
Would have all the talk shows listed and what they would do.
Okay, so look very carefully here. So at this time, Jerry Springer had the worst rating talk show, and the second worst rating national talk show at this time was Dennis Prager. So Dennis Prager had a nationally syndicated TV show here. See him at the very bottom? So you got Oprah Winfrey at the top, Jerry Springer at the bottom, and the only person who wasn't as bad as Jerry Springer, just slightly close to the bottom here, Dennis Prager. And so Dennis Prager's producer says, we need higher ratings. If we get higher ratings, you can stay on the air and you can do more good. You can teach people about ethical monotheism, but we got to get the eyeballs. And the best way to get eyeballs with a talk show is to create pictures that if people are surfing through channels and they're not even listening, right, the sound's off, they're just surfing, and they need to see a picture that immediately stops and arrests their attention. And so Dennis Prager's highest rated talk show, nationally syndicated talk show episode, was when he had a variety of women come on modeling lingerie. That got the audience.
Always wanted to get at least a 2 million people watching. That was like the magic number at that time. Obviously, Oprah would get 12, 14. That show was a beast,
So in the fight to stay on the air, the Jerry Springer show brought in a whole bunch of people from tabloid backgrounds who were much more at ease giving people what they wanted to see.
He eventually saw that this had potential. And yeah, he went along with me. Okay, let's give it a shot and see what happens.
All right, please welcome the host of our show, Mr. Jerry Springer.
That was the beginning of Richard saying, do not bring anything to me unless it is going to be interesting with the sound off.
I wanted somebody going through the channels, hitting our show, and saying, holy shit, what the hell is that?
And that was a winning formula. Suddenly...
Well, it just doesn't matter what I ask,
So when they put on material like this, right, suddenly the ratings went way up. Who could have imagined that? So a producer on the Jerry Springer show has come forward in a new interview that he acted as the pimp for the notorious talk show host Norm Lubau went from a multi-time guest to freelance guest booker to star producer on Jerry Springer's long-running lowbrow show, where the dregs of society would be called on to fight, to curse, spit, strip for the afternoon entertainment of the American public from 1991 to 2018. And he says that they would often hire fake guests who were eager to sleep with Jerry Springer after the show. So I knew a lot of people who went on the Jerry Springer show from the pornography industry, and it was fake. They would come up with just fake forms of drama. And yeah, a lot of people would go on the show and they would pretend to be something. And there are a lot of women who are happy to do double duty, right? They'd come on the show and then they'd have sex with Jerry after the filming. So much of what this guy did was not so much finding guests, but finding guests, women who would then go on to sleep with Jerry Springer. And so this guy calls this Netflix documentary a whitewash.
That's what it was about. It was about getting people to stop.
Hey, Jerry. Bob?
So this is a guy.
Did you get those shoes?
So one of the guests left his wife, left his 2 daughters, and married his pony, and had a full-on intimate relationship with his pony.
It started out to be a very funny, sexy kind of show. Basically, anything I could get away with at 2 o'clock in the morning.
I would, but I'm on a diet.
You might see some tits. You might see, you know, somebody doing a rap. It's like a party.
I told the stage manager, when he comes out, I want everybody on their feet. And I want them to chant, Jerry, Jerry, Jerry. And I'm like, really? Yeah, that's what I want. Because people at home, they're going to think he's famous.
That was kind of, I think, the beginning maybe of the metamorphosis of the show, was the fact that we kind of made him a little more fly. You know what I mean?
The one thing about Jerry is he had a tremendous sense of humor, and he had a tremendous sense of timing.
Come on out.
And you could see the passion he brought to the audience.
Any thoughts about which woman is here to confront you from your past?
It could be anybody, man.
Anybody? Hey, Mike, huh?
Suddenly, he loosened up, and that's what made it work. He made it work.
Yeah, people wanted to watch shows about men who married their horses.
Can't do that.
You'd be living in the office, 6 days a week, days and nights, like 10, 12, 14 hours a day, easily. And that sort of pressure cooker was really difficult, because there's some stories which probably went too far.
Okay, help me
This is an episode, I'm pregnant by my brother.
out here. You honestly think it's okay that a brother and a sister sleep together?
Yeah.
Let's meet your brother who made you pregnant. David.
Right, and then the brother who made her pregnant comes out, right?
Many of the people on the show had real problems. But the way to get help for serious problems is not to go on a national television show in front of an audience where you're being jeered and ridiculed.
You made her pregnant. You didn't mail it in.
You slept with her, right?
Yes, I did.
A lot of the guests were earnest. They literally did think they were coming on to solve a problem. You wouldn't believe how many people said to me on the television.
So many of these producers for the Jerry Springer show would just hang around the porn industry and porn industry functions because the porn industry was a great place to get freaky guests. It was a great place to find people who are willing to say or do anything to get on TV.
telephone. I can't wait to meet Jerry. I really hope he can help me with this. Jerry didn't help anybody with any of it. He just stood there and did his thing.
You say you still love her?
Yes.
You tell her how sorry you are that you ever slept with her. She is your sister, for God's sake.
These guests got it all out in this really extreme environment where there's a lot of people looking at you, and
some people would go crazy, right? They'd lose their mind.
Springer show. It had to be like 3, 4 o'clock in the morning when I get a call from this guy. He says, "Hi, my name's Mark." And I go, "Hey, Mark." And he's like, "I've been meaning to call the show for a long time." Okay, cool. Because you guys are the only people that really would understand me. I left my wife and my 2 daughters for a Shetland pony. Really?
Sounds like Kip. I mean, I hope Kip didn't love his pets this way.
Huh. And I'm like, this is a fucking dream. So the difference between bestiality and you is what? The animal loves you back. He said that he and Pixel looked at each other and they had an immediate connection. Okay, that's weird. I was petrified to pitch it. How am I gonna pivot from a straight up love triangle to a dude is sleeping with a Shetland pony?
Toby came in and said, "I have a man who married his horse and wants to come on the show." My first reaction is, will the horse be there?
I don't know, like, I guess you put it in a truck.
I'm in. I mean, to me.
They bring the horse on, and the horse and the man like licking each other's tongues. Okay, and this is all fun and games, right? And this is just all lighthearted, good fun.
Each to be able to hear you. You guys are such a great
And
level.
there are a lot of things that these producers felt they had to do that I'm sure they're not proud of.
I've been seeing somebody else.
Do what?
They had to create all kinds of combustible situations because they want to get that spark, they want to get the heat, they want to get the explosion.
So for years, pretty much every Jerry Springer show would feature a fight.
And yet, they had to know that when the show was over and the lights were off and those guests were sent on their way home, that they might have really changed their lives for the worse, forever.
Let me take this opportunity to thank you all for being with us, and I hope you're able to find some peace in your future relationship. I hope it works out for you.
So this particular show led to a double murder. Jerry Springer Fights Camera Action is the name of this Netflix documentary series. But this is where it hits home for me. Right, I'm the victim here, 1998.
The initial turning point came one Saturday when we got called into like an emergency meeting at NBC Tower. Just producers, senior staff. All of a sudden, the door opens and Jerry comes in. And that's like super bizarre. Jerry's never in on a weekend. Like, nope, not a thing. And he just says, you know, guys, I'm really sorry. But, you know, there's nothing more to say now.
I am dreading the day where I have to come before you and say, guys, I'm really sorry, but there's just nothing more to be said now. Because I don't want to let you down. I know you've got me up here, right, on a pedestal, and it would just be so disheartening if you found that I'd acted in some kind of improper manner.
And that's it. Walks out of the room. We're all like, what?
Right, I'm the victim here. This man, he soiled my angel. He soiled my angel, Kendra Jade. I thought she was my precious. I thought she was just for me. Aside from the men that she had sex with professionally as a porn star, but aside from that, and then to find out that this man had been with my precious, do you know how that made me feel? I wasn't happy, guys. He had some kind of erotic interaction with my precious Kendra Jade and Kendra's stepmom. His beast. His erotic appetites, do they know no limits?
It turns out there's a story about Jerry having a threesome.
Right. Here he is with my precious. Right. My lovely little Kendra. And her lovely, lovely stepmother, who I got to know. And Jerry went into bed with my precious. Right? How do you think that makes me feel? I'm the victim here.
With some guests from the show. I'm like, there's no way.
Some guests? That was my precious Kendra Jade.
There's no way. They're lying. And then I saw the pictures.
Right, here, I have to endure this, spread over tabloid papers around the world. Right, here's Jerry with my precious. Right, this just ricochets across all the tabloid papers. My precious is in a tabloid scandal. My darling 18-year-old Kendra Jade. My God, I was only 32 at the time. I mean, here's Jerry. I mean, I would have thought that Jerry Springer would be much more morally upstanding than this. Oh, it's just
There's
so
no
awful.
Way. There's no way. They're lying.
But there's proof.
Then I saw the pictures.
It was a setup. Right? How do you think I feel having to endure this kind of publicity? I mean, it was one thing to share Kendra with like the 60-odd guys that she would work with professionally, and I understood that she also saw Leonardo DiCaprio on the side, but Jerry Springer as well with her stepmom? I mean, that's Kendra, that's her stepmom, that's Jerry. My precious. Oh, it's just heartbreaking. It was amazing that I was able to love again after this.
It was weird because it was Jerry, because we never looked at him like that.
Most of us would never dream of exposing our most intimate secrets to the whole world.
I pray to God that I am never in such a scandal, because I know that your heart would just fall, that your life would be in tatters, that your vision of me would be destroyed, that everything that we have built up together would be finished if I ever was morally compromised in such a fashion. Please, God, help me to stay strong. I never want to let you down like this. This is my pledge to you. I will never be with a woman and her stepmother at the same time.
We cherish our privacy and want others to see only that side of us we choose to present.
He was always very private about his private life. He never talked.
Like me. I'm always very private about my private life. I hate to talk about myself.
About his ex-wife, the relationship that they continued to have, and the circumstances of his custody with his daughter.
And question from the chat, do I think the U.S. government had advanced knowledge of or involvement in 9/11? No, I do not.
Jerry absolutely loved his ex-wife. They were amicably separated and really good friends. His daughter.
I'm amicably separated from 20-odd ex-girlfriends. I'd hate to be exposed like this.
Had some disabilities. And
Women with disabilities just love me. I don't know why. I just have really high ratings among the disabled.
He put her up on a pedestal.
How's your daughter doing now?
And I know you put me up on a pedestal, and sometimes the responsibility is just too much. Sometimes I say, Lord, take this cup from me. I cannot drink it to the very dregs.
Yeah,
to the audience.
Jerry was a sweet man. Right, when he wasn't whoring around, he was a very sweet, tender, gentle, sensitive soul, much like myself.
Jerry was a stand-up father and husband.
And then, right, this is bad for the Jerry Springer show, but what about me? How do you think I feel seeing my precious Kendra Jade, like, tickling Jerry Springer and seeing Jerry receiving lip service from my precious?
So he got very lucky that it just kind of fizzled. I mean, if it had happened now, it would have been a canceled moment. For sure. You know, the guests are the guests. They've got their own problems.
The guests are the guests. The guests were there in large part because they were quite willing and eager to completely make stuff up, to go through various forms of fake drama. And I know this firsthand. And I also knew firsthand that Howard Stern was not the squeaky clean, monogamous figure that he portrayed himself as during the 1990s, because Kendra Jade would tell me that, you know, she would play with his penis under the table when she'd go on his show at the same time that he's talking about what a family man he is.
Going and how much it would have taken to help, say, the people of Maui.
For $5 billion, everyone could have got their home back and everything could have been settled. And no, nothing's been done. But yet we keep sending money to these other countries.
We have not forgotten about the people of Maui, nor the people of East Palestine, as today we focus on the people of North Carolina.
We will never leave you, and we will never forsake you. We are with you, and we are with the Democrats too. Infighting, panic, blame, a special report from inside the Democratic Party's epic hangover. With 2024 in the rearview, high-ranking Democrats are finally arriving at the hard truth, and disarray doesn't quite cover it. What can they do now? Depends on who you ask. James Pogue here.
This audio story was produced by...
Back to the same well of on-message orthodoxy. They won't spend tens of millions on ads enriching the same cast of consultants and operatives. But by 2024, Democrats had gone back to exactly this well of orthodoxy, and even the same set of trusted campaign pros like David Plouffe to preach it. Can you run just an incredibly intensive presidential campaign as if you were running a dead-heat battleground state governor's campaign? He asked before the election. And I think we can. The great looming risk of a second Trump presidency had made party leaders visibly averse to risks of any other kind. Toward the end of his speech, Sanders raised a finger and wagged it in that faux hectoring way of his. "Let us be very clear," he said. "This is not a radical agenda." A couple of older women near me cheered, and a tentative swell of applause rose up in the arena before people seemed to realize this wasn't supposed to be an applause line. "Let me tell you what a radical agenda is," he said. "Trump's Project 2025. On the second night of the convention, I stopped at a small gathering at a lakeside franchise of Harry Carey's Steakhouse. I was looking to talk to Jamie Raskin. In the past few years, the Maryland congressman has taken roles on the House Special Committee investigating the January 6th riot and as the lead impeachment manager charged with prosecuting Trump for insurrection in his trial before the Senate. He has emerged, at least in the liberal media sphere, as a symbolic leader of the effort to defend America's institutional stability and constitutional order. Raskin was swarmed by a crowd of fans and hangers-on inside the bar, so I had a beer outside, chatting with a woman from Orange County, California, who owned a company that did something in the field of biotherapeutics. She caught the eye of Michael Cohen, the former Trump fixer turned inmate turned...
Have you guys ever done MDMA? Because I see a story here. It might really help you. How a dose of MDMA transformed a white supremacist. So Brendan was once a leader in the U.S. white nationalist movement, but when he took MDMA in a scientific study, it radically changed his beliefs to the surprise of everyone involved. Now, I'm sure it wouldn't do the same for everybody, but an experience with how nice it is to be touched is transforming. I often notice when I'm teaching the Alexander technique and there is something called a table turn. So much of the work is done helping a person stand up, sit down, because in the folding and unfolding of your limbs, there is enough of a stimuli that your habitual habits of tension, unnecessary tension and compression will demonstrate themselves. But usually towards the end of a lesson, Alexander teachers will often give something called a table turn, where the student will lie down on the table on their back, and you'll support her head, say, with the book half an inch, an inch and a half thick, depending on what she needs. You just want to keep the head level. And so often when it comes time for the table turn and the student just lies down, and I bring my hands to the back of her head and to her neck to help her notice and let go of unnecessary tension. And as she lets go of that tension, with women in particular, I notice that like tears just start to flow. Right? When you stop holding, when you stop tensing, when you stop pulling down, when you stop contorting yourself, you can open yourself up to some unbelievable experiences, and you'll never know who you are when you initially let go of all this unnecessary tension that you've been carrying around with you for years, because we know ourselves by our habitual tension patterns. So there's a young man in this double-blind trial named Brendan, and he'd written in bold letters, "This experience has helped me sort out a debilitating personal issue. Google my name. I now know what I need to do." So they Google his name, and they see that this guy has been the leader of the U.S. Midwest faction of Identity Europea, the notorious white nationalist group rebranded in 2019 as the American Identity Movement. And so the woman running this study was worried. She'd just given a drug to a disgraced white supremacist and had apparently inspired him to do who knows what out in the world. If it's a matter of him picking up an automatic rifle, we have to intervene. Well, a murderous spree turned out to be the opposite of what Brendan had in mind. He realized that what he had to do was love. Love is the most important thing. He told the baffled research assistant, nothing matters without love. So this drug helps many people feel love. This drug will change somebody's beliefs and thoughts. And so the author wrote a book here, I Feel Love, MDMA and the Quest for Connection in a Fractured World. So MDA can help address trauma, substance use disorders, depression, eating disorders. I have close friends who underwent ketamine therapy. So they would get ketamine, and it was in conjunction with talk therapy, and it absolutely helped them to overcome debilitating levels of depression. So MDMA will often encourage people who are somehow primed to see the world in one way to reconsider their ideology. So it can help people see through the fog of fear that divides so many of us. And so this guy, Brendan, right, 30 minutes after taking the pill, he started to feel peculiar. And then he thought, wow, this is going to jeopardize everything I have in my life. And then this research assistant was conducting an experiment, and he tickled Brendan's forearm with a brush. And I noticed it was making me happier, the experience of the touch. I started progressively rating it higher and higher. As he relished this pleasurable feeling, a single powerful word popped into his mind, connection. And then seemed just so obvious, connections with other people were all that mattered. This is stuff you can't really put into words, but it's so profound. I conceived of my relationships with other people not as distinct boundaries with distinct entities, but more as we are all one. I realized I'd been fixated on stuff that doesn't matter. It just so messed me up. I'd been missing the point. I had not been soaking up the joy that life had to offer. And so then he reached out to a Chicago Antifa faction. And he told him that MDMA had made him want to prioritize connecting with other people above all else. And Brendan hired a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant to advise him. He enrolled in therapy. He began meditating. And he started working through a long list of educational books. So MDMA was a touchstone for growth. He has not completely abandoned his bigoted ideology. There are moments when I have racist or anti-Semitic thoughts. But now I recognize that those kinds of thought patterns are harming me more than anyone else.
So you don't cross that line.
Okay, how Politico suppressed Joe Biden stories.
Great example when Politico did that terrible, ill-fated headline. 51 intelligence agents or former intelligence agents say that the Hunter Biden laptop was disinformation,
right,
or bore the hallmarks of disinformation. Turns out that story was closer to disinformation because the Hunter Biden laptop appeared to be true.
But then Facebook also pulled all stories down about the Hunter Biden laptop, and I think Twitter did at the same time too.
Correct.
Yeah.
They punished the New York Post. It didn't help. I mean, Politico, my former employer, and I knew at the time, didn't do itself any favors. I was covering Biden at the time, and I remember coming to my editor and saying, hey, we need to write about the Hunter Biden laptop. And I was told this came from on high at Politico. Don't write about the laptop, don't talk about the laptop, don't tweet about the laptop. And the only thing Politico wound up writing was that piece that called it disinformation, which charitably could be called misinformation at the least.
Yeah, I mean, I had a hard time. You know, I wrote some pretty serious reporting on Hunter Biden, which actually ended up getting him prosecuted, the story on the gun.
Yeah, and I remember you consulted with me because you did the original report on the gun, and you came to me like, how do I write about this? Like, I'm like, honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, because it was hard to get it done.
You figured it out. Yeah.
I spent three months on it. I went to the laptop shop and I did all of the reporting in Delaware, and I did all of that. But yeah, it had to be like it had to be 100% nailed down. I had everything, you know, the police reports, I'm a solid reporter, but I do wonder if it would have been published a little quicker if it was a different type of story.
Well, since we're spilling tea about our former employer, I still have a copy of the story on my external hard drive. In 2019, a rival presidential Democratic campaign of Joe Biden's gave to me the tax lien, the Oppo research, the tax lien on Hunter Biden for the period of time that he worked at Burisma. And I wrote what would have been a classic story saying, you know, the former vice president's son was slapped with a big tax lien for the period of time that he worked for this controversial Ukrainian oil concern or natural gas concern, which is haunting his father on the campaign trail. That story was killed by the editors, and they gave no explanation for that either.
Interesting.
So that general experience, you know, obviously the public doesn't know about those things, but as a reporter, having witnessed the way in which the two candidates
we just get called like the terrible mainstream media. It's like you don't understand the process there.
We also don't understand the dumb decision of cowardly editors.
The man above us when we're trying to do our jobs. You know?
Okay, some good stuff on yesterday afternoon's two-way program with Mark Halperin.
The populist president going to Davos. But I will say this. You guys probably hear this too. I deal a lot with businesses, especially after November. C-suites are scared shitless of Trump. They really are. And more importantly, they have no idea how to talk to half the country. They're so used to, they adjusted because their workforce is still kind of from 2020, their DEI stuff. So what I noticed very quickly was immediately Bank of America had a graphic up and they tweeted out from their account, we don't, discriminate, blah, blah, blah. I can only imagine the panic conference call that the comms team, marketing team, legal, all got on immediately after Trump went. And I know the White House loves that. They love that power.
Yeah. And JP Morgan put out a very similar statement.
Yeah. The Journal and the New York Times have led the way in writing pieces about what you're talking about, Matt, and we've talked about it on these shows, but it's a massive story. They have billions of dollars at stake. They recognize now that their liberal employees and their liberal customers are going to have to take a back seat because for survival and market share, they're just going to have to switch. I mean, the cancellation of the DEI in the private sector before Trump did it is a massive story. And as Matt suggested, it's not being done on a whim. These are endless meetings with all the departments, legal, PR, investor relations, HR. Like, how can we get right with Trump? And it is going to be a 4-year story, certainly for the next year, especially. Mark, thoughts on the Davos, Florida man becoming Davos man?
Well, he did mail it in, right? He didn't actually go to Davos.
Yeah.
So that's just sort of a gimme for him.
He's busy.
So why do people go to Davos? Davos is where the future is created, right? A lot of very smart, capable, successful people go to Davos. It's not a bad thing.
He's busy.
Yeah, he's doing things. He's canceling DEI and he's calling Bank of America out on a carpet.
Yeah.
Can't think of a better. Well, I'm not going to say that. I don't want to get in trouble.
Any thoughts on any thoughts on his performance?
Not. I mean, I think what you said is accurate. That this is Trump's sort of troll in chief.
Yeah.
Trump is perhaps in the most powerful position, politically speaking, he's ever been.
Yeah.
This might be the zenith.
Yep.
We'll see.
Yeah. Dan.
Yeah, it was classic, Trump. He just was boasting about everything. Thought it was interesting that for the first time, it's only been 3 days, he took a shot at the Fed to start saying that he wants interest rates lower. It's been lost here this week, but inflation's remaining a little high. There's a story in lots of papers about the price of eggs, largely due to the bird flu. But, unlike his first term, where he kind of wanted interest rates low and the economy was running and there was no inflation, it's a different dynamic now. And so it's kind of going to be worth watching whether he starts to get frustrated as the Fed tries to kind of keep that plane landing of inflation coming down without tanking the economy.
So PBS last night released Trump's Comeback, a 53-minute
stunning political comeback.
Donald Trump's return to power.
A new chapter in American history will begin.
Drawing on years of interviews, his long history of overcoming obstacles.
Trump cannot see himself through the prism of loser.
And opposition.
His second presidential campaign was a revenge tour.
Now on Frontline, Trump's comeback.
For Trump, today's inauguration marks the greatest political comeback in generations.
He comes back to the White House, remarkable when you consider the way he left the White House.
Enjoying what was thought to be an impossible milestone.
You think back to after January 6th, the thought of him coming back to the presidency was not even remotely a possibility. A total impossibility to everyone but Trump.
So help me God. So help me God. Congratulations, Mr. Trump.
The political comeback is complete. He is now president.
We will never see anything like this in the lifespan of this country, I think, ever again. It wasn't just the most historic, most improbable, impossible comeback. It was a roarback.
All right, Hogan Gidley, he often appears on Mark Halperin's show.
It was Donald Trump's greatest comeback in a lifetime of trying to prove he was a winner.
In the scope of American history, it's almost unbelievable. In the scope of Donald Trump's life, it's kind of routine. The story of his life is massive swings between utter failure and glorious victory. And here's Trump, about as triumphant as it gets.
It's a story that goes back decades.
I don't think you can understand Trump's presidential career without understanding his history in business, in entertainment, his life story in New York, his father and the family that he grew up in. For him, winning is everything.
His supporters that stay with him, they just know that that's not the America that they want their children to grow up in. That a government that is so weaponized against a former president, at some point, it's gone too far.
All of these raids, all of these prosecutions only fed his presentation of himself as a victim, as a martyr, as someone who was there to take these bullets on behalf of Americans.
President Trump officially clinching the Republican nomination for president.
Donald Trump securing the Republican nomination in commanding fashion.
Then, a defining moment in his comeback.
You want to really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
You never know when you're in combat and shot at or shot, how you will react. The strength of your character and the fight within you is tested in moments like that.
To watch that man stand up, raise his fist and look to the crowd and yell, fight, fight, fight.
He was so defiant in that moment. I think a lot of people woke up to the fact that Donald Trump isn't just here to stay, but he's here to fight on their behalf. In that moment, I said, he just won the election.
No matter what obstacle comes our way, we will not break, we will not bend, we will not back down, and I will never stop fighting for you, your family, and our magnificent country. Never.
He had been shot at, indicted, convicted, and had to face a new historic opponent.
I know Donald Trump's type.
All eyes are now on Vice President Kamala Harris.
Now Kamala Harris 49, Trump 44 nationally in our new poll.
Armed with grievances, he promised to get even.
November 5th will be your Liberation Day. November 5th, with your vote this election, their lying, cheating, thieving, hoaxing, and plotting will come to an end. It's going to come to an end.
His second presidential campaign was a revenge tour. I think he's angry at law enforcement for trying to corral him. He's angry at the media for trying to tell the truth about him. He's angry at Democrats running against him. He's mad at life for not seeing Donald Trump the way that Donald Trump sees himself. And he is going to want to exact a certain amount of vengeance on all of those camps.
As the election approached, Trump rallied more and more supporters to his fight.
That group, like, tear it down, the system doesn't work for me, is now no longer the more working class voters who have been left behind by industrialization and so on. Now it's young people under the age of 30 who can't get a mortgage or feel like they can get married and have a kid because inflation's so high and they can't go to the grocery store anymore.
There were a lot of people that didn't like his personality, didn't like his tweets, just weren't sure that they wanted another 4 years, that ultimately went into the ballot box and voted for Donald Trump because of the strength, because of the fight, because they knew that at the end of the day, he would do right by them.
It was the ultimate comeback.
A stunning political comeback. Former President Trump once again becomes President-elect Trump.
State by state, President-elect Trump is on track to win every single swing state.
President Trump surprised across the country, across every demographic group.
We've achieved the most incredible political thing. Look what happened. Is this crazy?
This is a defeated president recapturing the White House 4 years after a pandemic that killed hundreds of thousands on his watch, after an election that he tried to overturn, after 2 impeachments, 4 indictments, 34 felony crimes.
Trump won the presidency and a get-out-of-jail-free card.
He has now been gifted legal immunity.
After winning an election, the federal cases all go away.
In his hush money case, unconditional discharge covering all 34 counts. No prison time, no fine.
Whether you like Donald Trump or don't like Donald Trump, you have to be struck by his ability to come back from this. For those who thought it might just be an aberration in American history, a fluke who won in 2016, he's proved them wrong.
So I'd like us all to say a prayer for the well-being of the marriages of Barack and Michelle Obama. They appear to be on the rocks. Let us also say a prayer for the well-being of the marriage of Kamala Harris with Douglas Emhoff. Let's hold them close to our hearts as they go through such difficult times.
Obama's because there seems to be some momentum picking up in the rumor mill about their marriage. All right, I'm going to bring you what I know. First, on January 15th, in the Substack of Jessica Reed Krause, also known as House and Habit, she's well connected in some circles and worked for RFKJ for a time, right? Didn't she? She was close to RFKJ. Close to. She posts the following. And she's been right about a lot, this gal. Michelle Obama's absence at Jimmy Carter's funeral certainly raised some eyebrows, but yesterday's announcement that she won't be attending Trump's inauguration confirms something is definitely going on between her and Barack. She said whispers about cracks in their relationship have been circulating in D.C. for over a year now, but this feels like the first public proof of a marriage on the rocks. The question now isn't if, but when. If I had to guess, they will wait until after the inauguration to announce it. Timing, is everything. And yet the story doesn't end there. For months, I've heard Jennifer Aniston's name tied to Barack. At first, it seemed ridiculous, but the rumors have remained steady among New York and L.A. circles. I should reiterate to the audience that Aniston has denied it, saying, I don't even know him. I've seen Michelle more than I've ever seen him. Then Jessica cites a DM she received the day before. Quote, he's with Jennifer Aniston. My old manager, now a friend, is connected to her inner circle. At a gathering with Jennifer's friends, the affair came up casually. Jennifer herself admitted it. They were sitting with a psychic, which makes it sound surreal, but it's definitely not a secret among her closest friends. Then yesterday, Meghan McCain had a discussion about this on her show, suggesting she is hearing the same. She had on Tara Palmieri, who's a reporter, saying, fast and furious loud, I've been hearing this rumor about the Obamas getting a divorce from reputable people. I'm not talking about TMZ, she says. I'm talking about very serious journalists telling me they are hearing that the Obama divorce rumors are true. And Tara, who's a senior political correspondent for Puck, says, I've certainly heard it for a while, too, even before Michelle said she wasn't coming to the inauguration. I do not know whether this is true at all, but if it is true, it truly would be a political earthquake in Democrat circles. Never mind America. I don't remember a presidential divorce in modern history. What do you guys make of it?
Oh, man. So I started hearing murmurs about this a while ago, too. And I guess so I asked Ashbrook, and he confirmed it. Ashbrook was like, because he hangs out with a lot of
psychic there?
We
did it with a psychic.
Yeah. And so that's the thing is, how awesome must have that situation been that the psychic was like, I see a president in your past that you're currently dating. And she's like, oh, it's Barack. You're right.
And then like through the crystal ball, it's like, I'll be there for you. Oh my God, it's Jennifer Aniston.
Jennifer Aniston, it was her circle of friends there allegedly discussing this. I mean, we don't know. But
that's how you know it's true.
Is it so hard to believe?
When a woman tells another woman, yeah, you can tell me, I'll keep a secret. The phone's already out. Now it's about to hit a group chat. So that is to me, the most conclusive piece of evidence.
Some of you are married. Did you see the post he put out to celebrate her birthday?
Yeah.
Was it her birthday or their anniversary?
Yeah.
He chose the least attractive photo of her that's ever been released. I mean, this is just wrong. Michelle Obama can look very nice in a photograph. This ain't it. She's got the kerchief on her head. They're about 20 feet apart in this intimate dinner. And he looks great. This is classic, right? Like, he's like, this is a great picture. He's got the 1,000-watt smile. And she looks terrible. Why would he do this?
Megan, if I posted that photo, I certainly wouldn't be dating Jennifer Aniston.
You'd be a dead man?
I'd be a dead man.
And I've only been married a year, but I've already learned you take the photos, you show it to the wife, and then you distribute it.
Well, no.
It's simple.
The way it works is you take the photo, you show it to the wife, you retake the photo, and then you get and then there's always a couple of
You got to get the principal to sign off.
Yeah.
But let me ask you for real, do you think this is true?
No, so here's the thing, and this is one other theory of the case. Maybe Jennifer Aniston is the Biden's answer to George Clooney here, right? I mean, maybe this, because I'll be honest, I have heard this sort of thing rumbling around in D.C., And there's some connections there with the like people, what you would call reputable people because they served in an administration. Maybe they served in the Obama administration. They certainly served in the Biden administration.
And that's the thing is, so the Bidens and the Obamas hate each other because Michelle Obama is very good friends with Hunter Biden's ex-wife. So that's led to a significant problem where they don't like Hunter. And if you don't like Hunter, Joe doesn't like you. So I would not be surprised if Holmes is right on with this of like, oh, well, why don't we do this?
It's like, oh, man, you give us problems, maybe you can have a problem or two.
Bingo.
But I'll tell you what. Next level. Wait, just to be clear, you are suggesting that maybe there is something going on between Barack and Jennifer and the Bidens are leaking it.
That's
Could
my
be.
guess. That's my guess.
Could be.
I'll tell you what.
Go ahead, Ashbrook.
If it is true and he leaves Michelle Obama high and dry and she's dissatisfied, I cannot wait to learn about all of these secrets that Barack Obama has kept hidden over the years from Michelle Obama and her pals, because you know there's a whole past on Obama
the long
that
tail.
nobody has written about, but she could be a first-person witness.
Here he is alone at the Trump inauguration, which really was, it was stark. All these former presidents came in with their wives, and then there he was.
It was jarring.
All alone. It was jarring, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, just the spectacle of it all, and then seeing him alone. I mean, it really did. Like, just as a viewer, you knew she wasn't coming, but then you saw the visual of it, and you're like,
And then the Clintons were there together.
I mean,
the Clintons can be there together. What is going on with the Obamas?
And I talked about this with Maureen Callahan, but the fact that Michelle did not go to the Carter funeral, it really is kind of shocking because she said, her team said she had an appointment. She had a scheduling conflict. Like, what could possibly be
for an inauguration,
a conflict that would keep you away as a Democrat from President Carter's funeral and then the inauguration? It's like, I don't, and somebody was it Maureen? Somebody was saying maybe she's having plastic surgery, right? But then he posts that picture of the two of them. Well, she wasn't having plastic surgery. So what the hell's going on?
And it's clearly not a partisan thing. Like, Michelle is not trying to resist, so she skipped the inauguration because she also skipped the Carter funeral. There's something happening there. There's something there.
They did a fist bump. I mean, that clears everything up, right?
I mean, there's, not to add insult to injury, but there's a Daily Mail report out today saying Kamala Harris's marriage may be on the rocks. Like, everybody's on the rocks. Again, I will say I love the Daily Mail, but the sourcing appeared weak. It was like people who know the couple, but like, I don't know if it's any better than that, but they're saying she's blaming him in part for her loss because he turned out to be such a hot mess liability. You buy it?
Oh my gosh. Well, we do know Dougie Emhoff's got a bit of a temper, right? I mean, there's some stuff that came there that was problematic. I also think like this is a guy who is so used to running his own world for so long, and then all of a sudden he's just sort of like basically a bag boy during the course of a 6-month election.
Hold the purse and shut your mouth.
Like, I can't imagine that went over terribly well.
The second gentleman.
I
love the idea that it wasn't the economy or the open border or like Joe Biden being a dementia patient or like you going on The View and saying, I wouldn't change anything from the last 4 years. That isn't the reason you lost. It was Dougie. Dougie.
It was Doug and his receding
I'm just going to say, I'm all for marrying people named Doug, but she blew.
Now, Barack Obama married Michelle Obama for political reasons. He needed to marry a fully black woman to boost his black credentials. All right, he could not marry anyone but a black woman if he wanted to have a thriving political career. Now his political career is behind him. He doesn't need Michelle Obama anymore. Kamala Harris also needed to get married so that she wouldn't come across as the spinster lady, the pathetic spinster. So now that they perhaps no longer need their spouses for political reasons, maybe they'll move on towards a path of lasting and fulfilling, loving relationships. Just like the Prince Charles, all right? He was in love with another woman, but she was married, and so he couldn't marry the woman that he loved. And so he's tried to make something happen with Princess Diana, who was a virgin. She was the right one for him in political terms, in terms of his responsibilities. as a prince and future monarch of England, but the relationship just didn't work, and so they got divorced, and Prince Charles finally ended up with the woman who he loved. So if Barry Obama's heart belongs to Jennifer Aniston, who are we? Who are we to blame him for that?
Me, but you could sense a little frustration. I will also just say, because I see in the chat, the attack on B of A, I believe, had to do with they withdrew from servicing companies that sold guns, going back to his first term, and B of A has since loosened that a little, but that was the crux, because I was wondering, did they screw him like 20 years ago on a deal?
No. It's part of it, but I can tell you,
probably
there's tons of MAGA people who have been debanked, including by Bank of America. It's not just the guns. And Trump, and they talk to Trump about it all the time, and they talked about it over the last 4 years. And they talked about it in the transition, like, what can we do? And so there he is, juggling. Look, could Clinton, Bush, Obama, or Biden before his decline have done that? Gone there, treated them that way? Yeah, but they wouldn't have. I mean, it's not just a swagger. He knows a lot of them. He's a billionaire, right? So he's not uncomfortable. He's not there are people at Davos richer than him, but if he went to Davos, he'd be amongst the richest. And it's just a different way of relating to them. He's not intimidated by them, and yet he respects them. He's in a different place now than he was before, as you guys have said. He's at the zenith of his power, and he feels it, and he knows what to say to him. And he's again, just go back to authenticity, like that. That's not like phony. That's Trump.
And Mark, he went in his first term, right? I believe he went to Davos one of the years and was like a kid in a candy store, like looking around at everybody. Yeah. To your point, now he's like the boss of it.
And now he's like, was it on Inauguration Day or Inauguration Eve? He's like, he's doing shitcoin rug pulls, making maybe $1 million.
Right.
I mean, I'm going to put aside the ethics of it. That's what I'm talking about. It's kind of badass to do that. I mean, my God, he's just like, boom, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, just made $1 billion. Like, what? Now I'm going to be president,
Yeah.
Oh. That's peanut corking in the background. I apologize.
That's all right. Matt, what were you going to say?
No, that's exactly it. No, I think exactly what you guys said. As I go to my first point, it's a man who's confident.
Yeah. All right.
So I keep firing up my Apple News app, and it keeps talking about these climate disasters that we're in. But most of the stories that are described as climate disasters really have nothing to do with climate change. Right. Hurricanes have decreased in frequency since at least 1980. Major hurricanes showed no significant trend since at least 1980. There is little evidence that hurricanes are becoming stronger on a global scale. Wildfires have increased in some regions, such as the western United States, but this is largely due to increased human ignitions in conjunction with poor city planning and forest management practices. Right. Wildfires overall have decreased in frequency over the last 2 decades globally. So has burn area. Reductions in fire risk must focus on addressing the root problem. CO2 emission reductions will not be helpful, especially in the short term. Heat waves have increased in frequency, intensity, and duration since 1950 at a global scale. They are projected to increase through 2100, but these trends are not observed everywhere, such as in eastern North America and in parts of South America. Future increases in heat waves may be partially offset by reduced atmospheric blocking that was caused due to Arctic amplification. Right, so this may reduce heat waves. Cold waves have decreased since 1950 virtually everywhere. Those trends are projected to continue through the remainder of the 21st century. So Donald Trump is embarked on a blitz of common sense measures. And Colin Liddell writes about it. So Trump's main political push in recent days can be typified by common sense policies, especially the attempt to generate competence by reverting to simplicity instead of the complexity of new green energy solutions and difficult to calculate impacts on global weather. He reverts to the tried and tested means of cheap gas. Instead of the complexity of redrawing the gender map, he reverts to the simplicity of male and female. Instead of the complexity of a massive migrant population existing in a no man's land between citizen and non-citizen, he prefers the clarity of legal and illegal. Instead of the complexities of international organizations and carefully woven diplomatic consensus, he prefers the simplicity of America being the biggest gorilla in the jungle and asserting its alpha male prerogatives. Steve Saylor notes, it's funny how rarely the mainstream media mentions that affirmative action touches every aspect of American life. Right? During the 50-plus years we've had affirmative action, it only seems to come up in the news about once a decade when there is some kind of Supreme Court case about college admission quotas. The rest of the time, the news media just ignores affirmative action, which touches all our lives. For the last 55 years, the establishment in America has tacitly agreed that the 14th Amendment's most famous mandate that everyone should be treated equally would be quietly suspended. The duration for which it will be suspended has never quite been specified, so we are 2 generations into the affirmative action emergency. The public appears ready for a change. The breaking point of popular patience arrived during the racial reckoning of this decade, as people had their faces rubbed in the openly racist hatred espoused by DEI apparatchiks. So as long as the cathedral was acting with a soft touch, it was able to act with impunity. But when its touch became harsh during COVID, that led to an enormous blowback that sees the right in ascendancy. So right now, it seems as if the establishment going insane at the end of May 2020 was the cause of the establishment's downfall 4.5 years later.
I agree with Mark. This may be the apex.
Yeah. One more thing. Another thing that came up in the Oval Office press conference was a reporter asked if Trump minded Elon Musk on X trashing Trump's big announcement about AI. What is it called? Starlight? That's called
Stargate.
Stargate. Thank you. I knew it wasn't Starlight. Stargate. And if you think about it, it's nuts, right? On the one hand, Elon Musk is going to Musk, and no one should be surprised. On the other hand, he's been given extraordinary access to the president. He's very involved in things, including in the AI decisions. And so it's nuts that he did it. Trump was asked about it. He played it down, just like he played down Murkowski and Collins. But there's a Politico story that ran a little while ago about, I think we have the headline. Do we have that headline? Did I make that up?
No. It claims that the White House staffers are furious.
Furious. Yeah, we have that. Number 8. Here it is. It says White House staffers. And of course, we know that Steve Bannon is very public about trashing Musk, which is also, again, not normal. It'd be like, if Anita Dunn were publicly criticizing Ron Klain. I mean, it's just,
Well, do me a favor, read the top of that NBC story, or better said, that Politico story, and then think about Steve Bannon again.
Because
he's
the White House. He's the White House. He's the Trump staff who's furious.
He's not the Trump staff. There are 3 sources in there.
Yeah,
but there's a person there who's obviously Bannon.
Yeah, of course. But there are others. So I've been more bullish on Bannon's Musk's staying power than some people.
Yeah.
I agree. Because I think Trump just doesn't care. Trump likes this stuff. Certainly he tolerates it. But any of you have a view of whether this is a seminal moment or no?
No. Well, the White House staff is telling me it's bullshit. I think there's some truth in between. I totally trust Asher Burns and Holly Otterbein, who wrote this story. So I do believe when they say there was a person in the Trump staff who said that Musk got over his skis.
Yeah.
I think that's true. Others describe him as furious. Not so sure. But to your point, the relationship between Musk and Trump appears stronger than a lot of people forecast.
I think you're right. And people try to play like the co-president line, or they try to do things that in a very transparent way we try to get under Trump's skin, and it is not for a various number of reasons. I think you're absolutely right, Mark. This is stronger than it's ever been. If this does ever peter out, I think it's more from just Elon kind of getting bored, and I don't foresee that anytime soon. But more, I don't foresee right now some sort of massive rupture, jealousy, BS. No.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Dan.
The one thing there is an opening potentially for Democrats. I mean, when the whole TikTok thing was going on, Musk made the comment in some interview that was like, well, if they would allow X, more access in China. Here he's trashing the AI investment. When he speaks about his own self-interest, I think there is an opportunity, particularly because there's a worry that one of the reasons he's doing Doge is to get insights into federal agencies and their inner workings for his own
time live. Actually, I'm just going to add an anecdote because what Matt said really resonated with me. I'm a Silicon Valley executive in the semiconductor industry, so I'm one of those C-suite guys. But for the audience to understand what he said rather quickly, our company got purchased by a European company, so it was a $7 billion company buying a $2 billion company during the George Floyd thing. And they had a big meeting on the weekend. Apparently, they worked all weekend to craft this memo in response to the George Floyd incident. And because it was a new culture that they had just purchased, they wanted our take on the memo that they were going to send to all the employees. And so they called 3 of the executives in. We know the culture of the new company. What do you think of the memo? I'm going to make an extremely long story short. We could not, for the life of us, figure out the purpose of the memo. And they wouldn't really admit the truth, but it took about an hour and a half of precision questioning and answering to get to the truth. And the answer was they just wanted to issue a memo without saying anything. They didn't want to offend anybody. Right, left, center, far left. The purpose of the memo was to say, we could issue a memo and not say anything. Check the box. And it took 1.5 hours of painstaking question. And at the end, we said, even though you're not.
I got to tell you, if it only took an hour and a half, you got off lucky. I know a lot of corporate folks, and nonprofit folks who spent 5 days trying to deal with it. So.
Well, I have to tack on the extra hour of HR training that I had to get after the meeting as I got sent to the penalty box.
I'm not minimizing your story at all. I want you to finish. I'm just saying I know people who spend many days on this exact topic. But go ahead, please.
Yeah, no. So I just wanted to add color to. Yeah, it's going to be extremely interesting to see how the whole world reacts, the business world reacts to the culture shift or not.
How do people I'm disappointed that you didn't give a stolen land acknowledgement when you began your speech here. I'm really
how do people in your world feel about Sachs and the others who are in D.C. sit with seats at the table? Do you feel you're represented, or do you feel like crap? The other team has got a leg up on us.
It's mixed. I mean, the people in from my side of the town want to stay as far away from Washington D.C. as possible. We don't want help. We don't want your money. We just want to compete in the marketplace, and that's what drives innovation. And so, I don't know. The people I hang with tend to stay very far away from it.
Are you a Trump voter?
I am a Trump voter. Yeah.
How many times?
3 times. And this decision was probably the easiest. I don't think I don't think they had a credible candidate.
What's your economic forecast for your industry and for the country in 2025?
Okay, you know how you don't predict how Trump's going to react?
Yeah.
I can't answer that question. Okay. I'm not smart. If I knew the answer to that question, I'd be doing something else right now. I'd be far richer than I am right now.
Who are the 3 best Celtics of all time? House hails from the same borough as leaders Schumer and Jeffries.
Don't even start with me and give Biden any credit on this.
He loosened up the pickle.
I don't even think he loosened up. But anyway,
talking about the hostage deal.
All right, Gaza, good.
It's history. It's history.
We'll be happy to hear that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Second is good signs on Ukraine, with Mr. Grinnell saying some very tough things about Ukraine. Mm-hmm. You can forget about NATO, NATO membership anytime in the future and so forth, which suggests that there may be some agreement ahead.
Yeah.
Third thing is TikTok. Trump is the only person who said anything sensible about TikTok, as far as I'm concerned.
Which is save it by getting it away from the Chi-Coms?
Just the fact that first of all, he doesn't seem to think that it's some horrible national emergency that we have to solve to get rid of this perfectly anodyne platform, as far as I'm concerned.
It just helped get him elected.
He wants to keep it for personal reasons.
All right, this is a very thoughtful list. What's number 4?
And until today, I only had 3 items, but then I realized the JFK files if he follows through. I mean, it's still possible that things will be redacted and we won't get much of information.
I'm an older millennial. I'm so happy with.
So anyway, that was a lefty talking about 4 things he likes about Trump's first week in office.
Whatever side of the aisle you're on, I'm happy with the pace of this administration.
You're supposed to call it elder millennial.
Well, I was born in the mid 80s.
Okay.
So
you're happy with the pace, meaning like you like the fact that stuff's getting done for America.
Yeah, I think, I'm used to seeing government move very slowly and be quite boring and undecisive, to put it mildly. And I work in the private sector. I've worked in the private sector for a long time, but I've worked in non-governmental organizations. I've worked alongside the government. I've seen how painful it is. And I'm thrilled to see them moving more at a pace of the private sector. You're going to get things wrong sometimes. You're going to do it wrong. You're going to get pushback. Things will get messy, frankly, but keep going. I like the pace. And so I just want to put that out there into the world as someone who's slow.
Super interesting. I got to say, I'll put it on the table for our group here. I think they're moving faster than the private sector. You could argue for 3 days, they've literally moved faster than, except for maybe Jesse Owens, they moved faster than anybody ever. Matt?
No, I mean, the private sector is, as our friend there in the Celtics I was talking about, I mean, there's no 3-hour meetings on a Saturday. Like these guys came in and were ready to roll. It is remarkably fast for government. And also, like, I've started picking up chatter, and it's wild to think about this. The guy was inaugurated Monday, argue like, okay, where's the reconciliation bill? How is this going to work? We're not even in the first work week yet.
And we don't even know what they did.
No.
We haven't read all these executive orders, and more are coming out.
No. Yeah. Well, and some of the personnel stuff they're doing, they're not announcing. They're just doing it.
Yeah.
Megan, are you a Trump voter?
Yeah, so I'm actually third-time Trump voter, and for me, this is what I wanted to see the first term. And the reason why I voted for him initially was I saw cancel culture coming. I saw a lot of this postmodernist ideology back then, and it scared me then. But I really saw just a new private sector face to government who would take the executive position seriously as an executive. I didn't like him. Like I wouldn't marry Trump personally, but I would elect him to an executive position because he knows how to be an executive. And so this is what I feel like I'm finally getting as a third-time Trump voter. It's like finally he can lead as an executive.
That raises a great point, which is Donald Trump, in some respects, and yes, he lost in 2020, should thank Joe Biden for beating him in 2020 because it gave him 4 years to kind of sober up. Now, he's not a drinker, but that gave him like years in the lab. It allowed Stephen Miller to go down and mix his potions and really come out and make a difference. And it brought home to Donald Trump the importance of time, of relationships, of strategy, of tactics, of good staff. And it's just a fascinating dynamic.
Yeah. And when he said today how happy he was to be president during the 250th anniversary of the country, the Olympics and the World Cup, he said to Davos, had I won in 20, I wouldn't be president during all these things.
Thank you, Joe Biden.
Yeah. Megan, do you like Bobby Kennedy?
Yeah, I'm very happy that President Trump embraced him when he did, which was before he got elected. And I think, again, as an elder millennial, I want to see good ideas meeting at the table, and I want good ideas elevated. I don't really care who brings them. Like I just, I don't care how many. I don't care about your personal life. I just want good ideas coming to the table, and then let's elevate them. So I'm really hopeful. I hope he gets confirmed.
Matt, do you have a question for Megan?
I guess what I've been thinking about is, what do you expect? What do you want to see from someone who likes RFK, right?
Yeah.
I assume likes that he's taken over Health and Human Services. What do you hope to kind of see from a RFK-led HHS department? And I'm going to get the puppy in 1 second. So if you don't, I'm going to listen to your answer. Then I'm going to go grab her out of the crate.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
I think the beauty of RFK is he's poking at a beast, okay? And he's just saying, give me more data. And so what I hope is he says, I want more data about that. And let's start publishing this crap like crazy. Can we have somewhere to go easily that gives us real studies, long-term studies on these vaccines? Let him ask intelligent questions. And that's what I hope. I just hope there's more questions than even answers with him. Because as American people, what's so beautiful about our country and what we've built here is you're allowed to ask a lot of questions. You don't have to be an expert to ask a question. Yeah. So I want to see more questions.
Mark, question for Megan.
At what point are you concerned that some of the things that RFK says are just kind of crazy?
I'm not concerned as an American thinking individual about what people say, because I will determine what is crazy and what is not for myself. So it's not on RFK to come up with perfect ideas. It's on me to sift through it from all the people that are sitting in front of me and to figure out what works out for me. I think American culture in general, guys, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but we own our bodies. We own our health decisions. So the more information you can present to us, even if it sounds slightly crazy or even really crazy, you can trust us to sift through it. Period.
As a reporter, I'm just sort of divided by it, because one of the only ways you can start to arrive at the truth is you have to question it.
Yes.
So at the same time, if you're always questioning it very often, or at least sometimes, you can wind up asking questions that are kind of nutty and kind of throw you off track. It's just
I'm not afraid of it. Look at Elon. Like, people who ask nutty questions usually get pretty far with.
That's right. That's a good point.
I am not afraid of nuttiness, and I'm not going to put it down. I think so much of the left looks at the right and they're like, man, those crazies, and we're all a little crazy. Let's be honest, me included.
Okay, I like that perspective on RFK. Let's get back to Vanity Fair here. James Pogue hanging out with the Democrats.
And cable news bit player who was hovering around, eagerly posing for selfies with everyone who approached him. "You're so brave," one woman wearing a great number of chunky beaded necklaces told him. "I'm not brave," he said. "I just..."
He being Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's former attorney who turned against him.
"Love my country." Cohen's demeanor changed when I told him I was a writer. "Call Maggie Haberman," he said. "Or call, do you know Cuomo? All of them, they all have my number. Everyone calls me." A young guy in a white Oxford shirt was very interested to talk about a gap in energy and political vision between Democrats and Republicans. He had recently left a state-level position to take a job on the Harris campaign staff. "Democrats really just don't want to see there's a crisis," he said. "A lot of us, at least." I asked if he wanted to sit down and talk for a while, but he hurriedly shook his head. "Take my card," he said. "Let's stay in touch, but I can't." He looked around. "You get it, I can't talk here." I was finding, much to my surprise, that Democrats at this convention were harder to convince to speak freely than Republicans, who may hate the media and regard us as an intelligence-gathering arm working for an enemy power structure, but they're rarely boring. I explained to him I was looking to speak with Raskin to talk over this problem Democrats faced in suddenly looking like the party defending the status quo and institutions of state. "I think this really is the core conversation in American politics now," the Harris staffer texted me later. "I completely agree about how head-spinning it is to see the American right begin to own anti-blob arguments that used to be the provenance of the left." The blob is a term coined by Ben Rhodes, a former senior advisor to Obama, to describe the intractable nest of private and governmental interests that make up our national security establishment. Not so long ago, a thing Republicans rarely criticized. The staffer marveled at how prevalent this conversation is becoming in circles where it previously seemed kind of unthinkable. There was no way to get Raskin alone at the party, where the crowd of admirers had not thinned at all in the time I'd been outside. So we met around 4 the next afternoon and traveled in a small entourage very slowly past the concession stands and roped-off sections reserved for streaming influencers, stopping every 10 yards or so as another nervous pair of fans would approach to wish him well, thank him, and tentatively ask to shake his hand and snap a picture. We took a tightly guarded elevator up to a suite on the 8th floor in the rarefied VIP area housing skyboxes and executive suites. The actor Mandy Patinkin was in the hallway as we exited the elevator. He froze when he saw Raskin. He clasped his hand and held on to it as they talked. "I just want to thank you so much for everything you did on the committee," Patinkin said. "To put Trump away, hold him accountable for his insurrection." "I appreciate that," Raskin said. "I just want to know if there's anything I can do to help," Patinkin said. "Well, now you know you've got friends in low places on Capitol Hill," Raskin said. "Thank you." I waited for a while as Raskin did a spot with a trim 35-year-old streamer in a tight-fitting suit named Brian Tyler Cohen. I had never heard of him before, but he has 3.5 million followers on YouTube, and he'd just gotten word that his new book, Shameless, Republicans' Deliberate Dysfunction and the Battle to Preserve Democracy, had reached the top of the New York Times bestseller list. Raskin congratulated him, and the two did a friendly interview about how Trump had met his match in Harris. "You served on the January 6th committee," Cohen said. "As Donald Trump becomes more and more unhinged and desperate, it elevates the possibility of violence or danger in the same way that we saw the insurrection on January 6th, 2021. Does that worry you at all, the prospect of another insurrection?" "We have improved the physical defense of the Capitol against MAGA insurrectionists and so on," Raskin said. "We're ready for them." We sat in a pair of armchairs overlooking the floor as the New York Congressman Tom Suozzi spoke far below us. Raskin wore a formal gray suit with an incongruous pair of chunky white-soled sneakers, the same kind that left New York Times style writer Guy Trebay despondent over the state of our establishment when Mitch McConnell, Hakeem Jeffries, and Kevin McCarthy turned up wearing them in an Oval Office meeting in 2023. Raskin, 62, is small in build with a bit of a comb-over, but he conveys a gravity and command that must serve well in the setting of a televised congressional hearing. I explained I thought Trump had a good chance of winning, and that if he did, Raskin might soon be at the center of some very bitter battles. Steve Bannon had predicted that a second Trump administration would hit the Department of Justice with a blowtorch. Well, They assert a very strong version of the unitary executive theory, he said. It will be Donald Trump calling up the Attorney General and ordering him to do whatever Trump wants in terms of squashing investigation of someone who has given him the big campaign contribution or going after a perceived political enemy. That's a radical reversal of our understanding of the relationship between the president and the prosecutorial function. They're putting that at the center. Raskin was elected in 2016 with the help of Sanders-aligned PACs, and in his early years in Congress, he developed a reputation as a civil libertarian and skeptic of the so-called blob. But the Trump years and January 6th seemed to make him more sympathetic toward our internal security apparatus. Last April, Raskin reversed a position he'd taken on 2 procedural votes and ended up casting what amounted to the decisive vote to preserve the backdoor search loophole in the Foreign Service Intelligence Act, which allows federal agencies like the FBI and the National Security Agency to surveil the communications of American citizens in some circumstances without probable cause or a warrant. A power that has been used since the Bush administration to spy on dozens of racial justice protesters, a state judge, a professor, a sitting congressman, and a U.S. senator, and even a batch of...
Okay, let me see if I can fast forward to a good bit here. In Democratic circles, talk about politics often stays within such a narrow band of issues and horse race chatter that officials at the DNC often seemed intrigued to talk big picture. So very different from the mood at, for example, the National Conservatism Conference.
Said to me now. So I was in the awkward position of having to defend the law enforcement objectivity of the FBI in terms of the Trump investigation and political social polarization which is being promoted by the right wing. It's consistent with...
And the left wing doesn't do anything to promote this kind of polarization. It's just entirely the right, really?
A tradition of American pragmatism, he said, arguing for a liberalism that could bring a revolution by increments. And pragmatism gets a bad name because people think pragmatism means adjusting to political reality.
Okay, come up. Let's get to the good stuff here, mate.
Energy for the future. That night, I went to a party hosted by Dropsite News, started recently by the left-wing reporter Ryan Grimm. I ended up vaping outside with a big donor to both the site and to the Democratic Party, a dapper and erudite man who'd been a construction worker before he made a bunch of money in finance, who was now looking for ways to push the party toward a more populist and anti-establishmentarian worldview. We talked about a passage from Norman Mailer's dispatch from the 1964 Republican National Convention, held at the Cow Palace in San Francisco. Mailer had written it as a picture of a moment when a wild new energy of conservatives in the West and the Sun Belt formed behind the candidacy of Barry Goldwater and caught the old establishment of the East, as Mailer called it, with its heartland stretching from Maine to Nassau, New York to south of France, off guard. This establishment had waited too long to find a moderately liberal candidate who bore its pedigree. It took half a century and the emergence of Trump to finally complete the rebellion Goldwater had begun. Mailer wrote of hearing a band of bagpipers marching constantly through the streets that week. There was a vast, if all private appeal in listening to the pipes shrill out the herald of a new crusade, he said. Something jagged. Viking hunters loose in the land again. And this had an appeal which burrowed deep. There was excitement at the thought of Goldwater getting the nomination. Against the Pipers' tribal skirl, the left's answer had long been the promise of a utopian future built out of collective struggle. Their welling energies were summoned by songs like Solidarity Forever, We Shall Overcome, and Which Side Are You On? The miners' protest song written by a 12-year-old miner's daughter named Florence Reese. A hint of this old energy came on the first day of the convention from the United Automobile Workers president, Shawn Fain.
Okay, let's leave it there. That was from Vanity Fair. I'll talk to you